Don't they want to come in?
Hello everybody.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Oh, dear. Good morning. Most wonderful good morning. Good morning. Good morning. morning. Good morning. Most wonderful. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Shall we make a start? Yes. I know you are burning to get started. So, very good morning to all of you and a very happy and successful and prosperous new year. Let's hope it's going to be a good one. I know you have quite a tough program this week, don't you? With all the submission deadlines and all the stuff coming up. So, yeah, let's get cracking. Welcome to the BI 301 module about enzymes and metabolism. This is actually one of my, I have to say it, one of my favorite modules because for once I understand the contents. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Why do I like it? It is just simply because this module really lays the foundation of what is to come. And it also gives us sort of a brief glimpse into totally hot and sexy stuff that's going on every second, every millisecond in every single cell of your body. Whether you are just digesting your breakfast or whether you are in starvation mode because you didn't have any breakfast, where you just had a cup of coffee or just a sip of water, everything that happens that keeps you alive, more or less, happens in this module. And we are going to look at the things, at the key players that are essential to life in a sort of a sequential order. First, we will discuss a little bit enzymes and enzyme reactions. And I think most of you have, or pretty decent idea of what enzymes are, what they do. And I will try my very best to shatter these ideas and to challenge some misconceptions. And then we will look a little bit more into how these enzymes all work together to keep us alive and what biochemical pathways there are that are constantly happening to keep us alive. I think I sent out an email with some material about reading lists, textbooks, or something like that. I do not want you to go away and buy this 150 quid Leninger book. There are books in the library, and you can get an online version for free. Not the latest edition, but who cares, right? Biochemistry hasn't changed that much in the last 5 years or so. And I also sent you a link to a really good online resource that is free and that I found particularly useful. Can I help?
Yeah, so I'm looking for my ID card.
Okay, can you please come back after the lecture then?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. That is mainly for the second part when we look at biochemical pathways. The first part, the enzymes, there is a slight problem with that because in most cases the textbooks are all right about enzymes, with the exception of certain sections, which I think the technical term is rattle the piss out of me, because most textbooks just simply don't get it right. And for somebody who absolutely loves enzymology, yes, I know I'm a weirdo, but for somebody who loves enzymology, seeing these mistakes made in textbooks, it's like, as I said on the group chat, you know, my soul splits and a new Horcrux is generated when I see these horrible things. So I would not necessarily recommend a textbook for the enzyme section. However, I have created a lot of video tutorials that basically cover most of what we are going to do in these enzymes. And you can find these tutorials in a playlist on my channel, PK11 Kent. There's a playlist on enzymes. And I come back to this playlist a little bit later in the second part of this session. So, first question is, what are enzymes? Well, usually people will argue enzymes are proteins, and that is correct to a certain extent. Although in 1986 there was a bit of a revolution, and the established bioscientists, biochemists were really shaken by the findings of a guy called Czech, who discovered that also RNA can have enzymatic activity. Certain RNAs can act as enzymes. And I was pretty much, you know, it's woo, that's weird stuff. We in this course will only deal with proteins as enzymes. So no stress about it. I'm not going to ask you anything about weird RNA that has enzymatic functions. I just want to make you aware of there are weird things going on sometimes. Enzymes are sort of described as catalysts. They participate in a reaction, but they are not consumed and they are recycled. So my favorite example, and you will see this equation ad nauseam, is we have a substrate that can be any kind of chemical. This substrate interacts with the enzyme. We usually then form in a reversible reaction what is called an enzyme substrate complex. And we are going to look only at reactions that are, in a way, that are one-way reactions, where a product is generated and the enzyme is released. So if you like, you can write this reaction as S goes to P. Substrate goes into a product, or is converted to a product, with the help of an enzyme. But this enzyme is not used up. It is basically regenerated. It's like the doctor. And it can immediately participate in a new reaction. And that makes enzymes incredibly powerful. Because if you think about it, if it is constantly regenerated, if it's constantly recycled, you only need diddly squats in the cell. Minute amounts of enzyme, because the enzyme is constantly regenerated. And it's there. And it can do the reaction, do the job done, next. And we have sometimes enzymes that can do the job, basically, can catalyze this reaction from substrate to product 10,000 times per second. Enzymes can be incredibly fast. What do enzymes actually do? Well, as I said, they catalyze the reaction from substrate to product. And very often, and contradicting myself what I just earlier said, if we have sort of an equilibrium reaction, S is produced into is converted into a product, and the product can go backwards. In this case, we have a certain equilibrium. And I know that you are currently doing a little bit of thermodynamics. Is that right? Yeah. I see some people rolling their eyes. Seems to be your favorite subject, thermodynamics, at the moment. Is that right? Thermodynamics, statistics, and kinetics. Huh? Yeah. Makes the strongest man weep. But you have a certain equilibrium if you allow it to establish this equilibrium here. The important thing is an enzyme can not change the equilibrium. An enzyme cannot change the equilibrium. The equilibrium is fixed. But what the enzyme can do is it can make this reaction much, much faster. than it would usually happen. Just to give you an example, if you, let's assume you had turkey for Christmas lunch. Hopefully most of the turkey will have cleared the system by now. Turkey, protein. So we have proteins. And of course we want to convert the proteins into amino acids. Okay? You can do that just by simply waiting. Proteins would usually degrade into individual amino acids, but this reaction is fairly slow. It is so slow that you can still find, for example, somebody did this experiment with McDonald's burger, bless you, with a McDonald's burger. They sort of sterilized it, the burger, and then sealed it. And prevented any microbial growth, any microbial degradation. So it was just the burger, no enzymes involved. They sealed it, and that was 20 years ago. The burger is still intact. So the protein is still there. So in order for a protein to decompose or disintegrate into its individual amino acids, it takes thousands and thousands of years. Right? Okay, we can do that a little bit faster. We can actually do this reaction at, say, 110 degrees centigrade, pH 1 or 2, and then you can get your overnight. So the protein would be degraded to individual amino acids overnight. Let's say 24 hours, one day. Most of the protein is then decomposed. Now, of course, if you want to digest your turkey, you don't want to incubate yourself at 110 degrees centigrade at a pH of 1 to 2. It's pretty harsh conditions, isn't it? It's not really compatible with life. Although, having said that, we need to be careful with our assumptions. Now, here is where enzymes come into play. If you do this reaction with an enzyme, for example, chymotrypsin or trypsin or pepsin or anything like pepsin. Let's go for chymotrypsin. You can do this reaction at 37 degrees, pH 7, within seconds. How cool is that? The enzyme, which is also a protein, can completely destroy any proteins in its wake and degrade that to individual amino acids. Now, in this case, the enzyme is specific for its substrate and for the reaction. This enzyme that we are here looking at, and by the way, enzymes are usually called by the kind of reaction that they do. with the ending ase at the end. So in our case, this would be a proteinase, which is quite helpful because it gives you an idea what the protein does. In this case, the proteinase will only interact with proteins. It will not touch carbohydrates or lipids or anything else. It will only go for proteins, and it will hydrolyze them into individual amino acids. That's what a proteinase does. So we have specificity. There are other enzymes that are even more specific. So we will get to know one of those in a moment. But they all catalyze a particular reaction. They do something. And they do it quickly. Now, if we look at sort of an energy scheme, and I know that you absolutely love these things. Here we have a reaction. Here we have delta G. Gives energy. We find that our substrate usually is at this level here. Here's our substrate. Our reactants, that would be the full protein, for example. Our reactants, the product, lies down here. Yeah? Here is actually, this difference here is our delta G between the substrate and the reactants. The way I've drawn it here, is this reaction from substrate to product, is it possible? The way you see it. Can it happen? What do you think? The way it's drawn, I haven't specified temperature or anything like that. Can it happen? No. Well, the answer is yes. Sorry, Alex. Because it goes downhill. If it goes down, the reaction happens. If I was to start down here, I had to go up, would not be possible. So this is a standard energy diagram, and in this case, the reaction is feasible. And as it is drawn here, we would never have any substrate present because it would immediately go like boom, generating the product. Why doesn't it happen? Well, because there is sort of a mountain between. The substrate sits on one side of the mountain, the product sits at the other side of the mountain. The reaction would like to happen, or is technically speaking, it is possible that it happens, but it doesn't happen because the substrate is sort of blocked. It can't go over the mountain. Big mountain. Substrate can't get over it because what's in between, what stops the substrate from going into a product, is what is called and it's usually abbreviated like that. This is called an activation energy. Very simple example. You have hydrogen and you have oxygen molecules sitting together. You can mix them. Nothing happens. They can perfectly coexist with each other. Nothing happens. But if you reduce the activation energy, but just by, a little flame or something like that, it goes boom. You reduce, or as long as you've got a high activation energy, nothing happens. The reaction doesn't happen. But if you lower the activation energy, so that's a new activation energy. Oops. You lower the activation energy, now the reaction can proceed much easier. And that is exactly what enzymes do. Enzymes change the activation energy of a reaction. They cannot change the equilibrium. Because, for example, I can also write it as delta G0 as the standard free energy. And we know that delta G standard free equals minus RT ln K. You remember that? Well, it's quite useful for Friday, isn't it? This equation. What do you see here? Our delta G never changes. It's always the same. And if delta G is negative, of course, then the reaction happens. If delta G is not negative, if it is positive, then the reaction can't happen. So our equilibrium constant would always stay the same, with or without enzyme. But with enzyme, our activation energy is lowered. Let me see if I can find something that... Oh yeah, that looks dangerous. So if I fall off that chair, right? Right. Let's assume this is the level of the substrate, right? Down there is the level of the reactant. In order to get down there, I would need to get over the activation energy here. You get it? I'm so glad that my wife can't see it right now, because she would go, Jesus Christ, what are you doing, man? Now, with an enzyme, this activation energy would go down right there. And I can easily step over it. But if you think about it, the height from here to here in both cases is exactly the same, isn't it? From the substrate to the product down here, it's this difference. whether or not there is an activation energy or not. So the equilibrium stays the same, the equilibrium constant, but it's the activation energy. And that is what an enzyme does. It does not change the equilibrium, it changes the activation energy. And that is really, really important for you to understand. It cannot change the equilibrium. Okay, does it make sense? With that, you have already half of that module learned. So that's the good news. Now, let's just simply look at a simple reaction. Let's just say we have a substance. Does anyone know what this substance is? It will bother us a lot in this module. Substance is pyruvate, a key metabolite that we will discuss ad nauseam. With the help of what is called a cofactor, this substance is converted. And I'll tell you why this is converted when we talk a little bit more about metabolism. Into this substance. Anyone know what this is? No? Give you an example what this is. No? Okay. Can I borrow you for a moment? What's your name?
Lewis.
Lewis. Fantastic, Lewis. Thank you very much. What I want you to do is, it's not terribly horrible. Go like that.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. Stay there. Like that. Can you feel something? Pain. Why? Where does it hurt?
My knees.
Your knees. In the knees or in the muscle?
Knees.
The knees. Oh, do you have a problem with the knees? No. Okay. Okay, then stay there. No, go a little bit up with your arse. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. So we just, you know. Usually after 2 minutes they give up. How are you feeling? Painful? It's getting painful, right? Yeah. Where? In the knees or in the? In the leg. Aha. Thank you very much, Louis. Give him a big hand. We don't want him to endure that even more. This is actually lactic acid. And we will discuss why there is lactic acid coming up in Lewis muscles. We will discuss that. But this conversion is done by an enzyme, which is lovingly known as LDH, or lactate dehydrogenase. And we can see with the name, we identify one of the substrates of this enzyme, namely lactate, and it basically takes hydrogens away. Take away hydrogenase. So the clue is already in the name. This enzyme is actually present in every single organism that we are aware of, and it catalyzes this reaction. It's highly specific for pyruvate, although it can also tolerate a slightly longer form, slightly different molecule. We will discuss that. But it's not very good with that. And if you make the substrate even longer, then the enzyme says, sorry, no can do. It also produces only one form of lactic acid. Do we have a chiral center in lactic acid? If you look at it, your chemistry coursework 1 or something like that is coming in. Is there a chiral center in it? Yeah? The second C, isn't it? Yeah? So lactate dehydrogenase only produces it with the OH group to that side. It doesn't produce the OH to the other side. So enzymes are usually highly stereospecific. And that is what lactate dehydrogenase does. It grabs the pyruvate and converts it into lactic acid. How does it do it? Well, enzymes have a site. This is usually a binding site, and here the substrate can bind. And for many years, it was sort of, how do enzymes actually get this incredible specificity? And it was assumed that enzymes work sort of with a mechanism that was described as key and lock. You have a key, that's your substrate. You have an enzyme, that's the lock. And only if you have exactly the right shape, your enzyme will bind the key. Only if it is exactly the right shape. This model, the key and lock model, was used for a long time. But then people started wondering, well, if we modify the substrate a little bit, then according to the key and lock model, it should not really work that well anymore. But for many enzymes, it turned out it still works. So how does that work? The answer, or the new model, let me see if I find it. Is what's called the induced fit model. So, basically, your active site is not a rigid bit of the protein. An enzyme is a living thing. It always slightly moves around, shifts, changes, does things, dances around, changes shape a little bit. Substrate comes along. This is the active site. Oh, look, there's a substrate that looks reasonable. So, upon arrival of the substrate, the active site changes so that it can easily accommodate the substrate. I could probably do that with my foot as well. Right? It would fit, not great, but it would fit. So that accounts for slightly different substrates. What about the left hand? Can I do that with my? Not really. Some enzymes don't care, they don't give a damn whether it's left or right hand, but some are incredibly fussy. So you can't. That induced fit model actually explains very nicely how an enzyme can deal with different substrates. Another nice example is let's assume I am an apple-ase. This is the active site, this is the substrate. Well, no problem, I can easily convert apple into other products. Orange, pretty similar in shape. If I was to peel it, I could easily eat it, right? Not a problem. Third substrate, banana. Don't try that at home.